I used to think the scariest thing in the world was being alone. Not the kind of alone where you spend a Friday night in your apartment with takeout and a movie. I mean, the kind of alone where you start to wonder if anyone would notice if you disappeared for a few days. The kind where your phone stays silent for so long that even a spam call feels like proof you still exist. Then I met Lucas, and for the first time in my life, I felt seen. He noticed the things most people looked right through. He remembered how I took my coffee. He remembered which side of the booth I liked to sit on. He remembered the titles of books I mentioned once and never brought up again. He made me feel like I mattered in a way I had never felt before. At first, being seen felt like the most beautiful thing in the world. I didn't understand there was a difference between being seen and being watched. My name is Emily Parker, and at the time all of this started, I was 21 years old. I was a junior in college, living by myself in a small one-bedroom apartment about 15 minutes from campus. It wasn't anything special. The kitchen floor creaked near the fridge, the heater made a clicking sound at night, and one of the windows in my bedroom never quite shut the way it was supposed to. But it was mine. That mattered to me. I paid for it with a part-time job at a local bookstore and whatever financial aid I could stretch far enough. Most of my weeks looked exactly the same. Classes in the morning, work in the afternoon, homework at night, sleep if I was lucky. I wasn't miserable exactly. I just felt like my life was happening in a room no one else ever walked into. I had friends, but not many. Maya was probably the closest thing I had to a best friend. We had met freshman year during a psychology class, and she was the type of person who could talk to anyone like she had known them for years. I admired that about her, mostly because I was the opposite. I was quiet. Not in a mysterious way, just in a forgettable way. People didn't dislike me, they just didn't always remember to include me. Group chats formed without me. Weekend plans happened around me. People would say, "Oh my God, Emily, we should hang out sometime." Oh, and then sometime never came. I got used to it. That's the dangerous thing about loneliness. After a while, it stops feeling like a problem and starts feeling like your personality. When you spend enough time feeling invisible, you stop questioning the first person who makes you feel important. That was my first mistake. There was one place where I didn't feel completely out of place, though. A coffee shop a few blocks from campus called Oak and Ember Coffee. It sat on the corner of Maple Street and 8th, tucked between a used record store and a tiny flower shop that always had buckets of tulips outside, even when it was too cold for them. Oak and Ember had big front windows, dark wooden tables, soft yellow lights, and the kind of indie music that made studying feel more romantic than it actually was. It always smelled like espresso, cinnamon, and warm pastries. I loved that place. Most afternoons, if I wasn't in class or at work, I was there. I had my spot, a small table by the window, close enough to the outlet that I could charge my laptop, but far enough from the counter that I didn't feel like I was in anyone's way. I usually ordered an iced vanilla latte, even in winter, because I was stubborn like that. Sometimes I brought a book, sometimes I brought my laptop, sometimes I just brought my journal and wrote down things I would have been too embarrassed to say out loud. I thought that table by the window was my safe place. I didn't realize windows work both ways. Back then, my routine felt comforting, predictable. I liked knowing that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, after my last class, I could walk into Oak and Ember, order the same drink, sit at the same table, and disappear into my own little world for a few hours. I used to love how predictable my little routine was. I didn't know predictability could make you easy to follow. The first time I noticed Lucas, he was sitting 2 tables away from me with a black coffee and a laptop covered in stickers. I remember one of them was a faded NASA sticker peeling at the corner. Another was a small white skull with a rose in its teeth. For some reason, I noticed that. He had curly black hair that always looked like he had run his hands through it too many times, blue eyes that seemed almost too bright under the coffee shop lights, and a few freckles across his nose that made him look younger than he probably was. He wore hoodies most of the time, or denim jackets, or flannels rolled up at the sleeves. He looked like someone who belonged in a coffee shop. At first, I didn't think much of him. He was just another regular. Oak and Ember had plenty of those. The girl who always ordered matcha and cried over textbooks. The older man who did crossword puzzles and pen. The guy who brought his golden retriever and sat outside even when it was freezing. Lucas became one of those background people. Then I started catching him looking at me. Not staring, exactly. At least, that's not what I called it then. It was more like I would glance up from my book and find his eyes already on me. The second I caught him, he would look away, suddenly very interested in his coffee or his laptop screen. The first time it happened, I thought it was an accident. The second time, I smiled. The third time, he saw me smile and nearly knocked over his drink, trying to pretend he hadn't been looking. I thought that was cute. Painfully cute. Every time I caught him looking, he turned away so fast that it made me laugh under my breath. There was something sweet about it, or at least I thought there was. He didn't seem arrogant. He didn't seem like the type of guy who expected attention. If anything, he seemed nervous. Back then, I thought he was shy. Now I wonder how many times he looked at me without getting caught. For the next couple of weeks, we played this silent game. I started calling it eye tag in my head. I would walk in, order my vanilla latte, and try not to look around too obviously to see if he was there. If he was, my chest would do this embarrassing little flutter that I hated and secretly loved. I started choosing my outfits more carefully on days I thought I might see him. Nothing dramatic, just a nicer sweater. A little mascara. The earrings Maya once told me made me look less like a stressed-out librarian and more like a hot, stressed-out librarian. I told myself I wasn't dressing up for him. I absolutely was. Sometimes he got there before me. Sometimes I did. Sometimes we ended up sitting across the room from each other, stealing glances between laptop screens and paperback pages. Other times, the shop was crowded and he'd sit closer than usual, close enough that I could hear him tapping on his keyboard, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something clean and woodsy like cedar and soap. I started hoping he would talk to me. That was the worst part. I didn't just notice him noticing me. I waited for it. I looked forward to it. A stranger's attention became the brightest part of my day. One Thursday afternoon, the barista, Hannah, wrote my name on my cup like she always did and slid it across the counter. "Your friend's here again," she said casually. I froze for half a second. "My friend?" She nodded toward the window. Lucas was sitting near my usual table, looking down at his laptop. My face got hot. "Oh, he's not my friend." Hannah raised her eyebrows like she didn't believe me. "Really? Huh. I just see you two here at the same time a lot." I laughed it off because there was nothing else to do. At the time, it felt like the kind of coincidence people tease you about before a love story begins. Now I know it wasn't a coincidence at all. I took my drink and walked toward my usual table, but Lucas was sitting close to it. Not at it. Just close enough that I would have to pass him. As I did, he looked up. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then he smiled. Not a big smile. Not the kind guys use when they know they're attractive. It was small and nervous and almost apologetic. "Hey," he said. "Hi," I said back. That was it. One word each. But I thought about it for the rest of the day. I thought about it during my evening shift at the bookstore. I thought about it while shelving romance novels and pretending not to read the backs of them. I thought about it while walking home under streetlights, holding my keys between my fingers the way Maya had taught me. I thought about it while brushing my teeth in my tiny bathroom, smiling at myself like an idiot. It was ridiculous. I knew it was ridiculous. But when your life has been quiet for a long time, even the smallest sound feels like music. The next time I saw him, he finally did more than look. Oak and Ember was unusually crowded that afternoon. Every table was taken except mine. And even mine had only one empty chair because my backpack was sitting in the other. I was halfway through a chapter I wasn't absorbing when a shadow fell across my book. I looked up. Lucas stood there, holding his coffee with both hands like he needed something to do with them. "Hey," he said again. "Hi." He glanced at the empty chair across from me. "Is anyone sitting here?" I shook my head and moved my backpack too quickly, almost knocking it onto the floor. "No, sorry. You can sit." "Thanks." He sat down, and for a few seconds the silence between us was so awkward I almost laughed. Then he nodded toward my book. "I've seen you reading that a few times," he said. "Is it good?" I looked down at the cover, suddenly forgetting every opinion I had ever had. "Yeah, I mean, it's slow, but in a good way." He smiled. "That makes sense." "What does?" "You seem like someone who'd like slow books." I should have asked what that meant. I should have wondered how long he had been watching me closely enough to decide what kind of books I seemed like I would enjoy. "Oh, a slow?" But I didn't. I just laughed. His name was Lucas Reed. He was 24. He said he did freelance graphic design and some remote work for a small marketing company. He lived about 10 minutes away. He liked old horror movies but hated haunted houses. He drank black coffee because, according to him, he had ruined his taste buds in college. He asked me questions without making me feel interviewed. He listened to my answers like they mattered. When I told him I worked at a bookstore, he asked what section I liked shelving most. When I said I was studying psychology, he didn't make the same tired joke about me analyzing him. For almost an hour, I forgot to feel self-conscious. Then, just before he left, he said something I would replay in my head later for a very different reason. "I feel like I've seen you around forever." I laughed because I thought he was nervous. I didn't know he was being more honest than either of us wanted to admit. Before he walked out, he asked for my number, and I gave it to him. That night, I lay in bed staring at his first text. It was simple. Just, "I'm glad I finally talked to you." I read it 3 times before replying. I didn't know that while I was smiling at my phone, feeling like maybe my life had finally opened a door, Lucas had already been standing on the other side of it for a very long time. Lucas and I had our first real date the following Saturday. I remember because I changed outfits 4 times before leaving my apartment, which was embarrassing, considering we were only going to a diner and then a movie. Nothing fancy. Nothing that required me to stand in front of my closet like I was preparing for a job interview. But I did anyway. I tried on a black sweater, then decided it made me look too serious. I tried a blue dress, then decided it looked like I was trying too hard. I ended up wearing jeans, ankle boots, and a cream-colored cardigan Maya had once said made me look soft in a good way. I wanted to look like myself, just a slightly better version of myself. Lucas picked me up at 6. When I came downstairs, he was leaning against his car with his hands in his jacket pockets. He wasn't scrolling through his phone. He wasn't acting impatient. He was just waiting. When he saw me, his expression changed in this quiet, careful way, like he was trying not to smile too much. "You look really pretty," he said. I looked down because I didn't know what to do with compliments. "Thanks." "I mean it." That made it worse. Or better. I couldn't tell. He opened the passenger door for me, and I remember thinking that people always joked about small gestures like that, like they were old-fashioned or fake. But when you're not used to being treated gently, small gestures don't feel small. They feel like proof. We went to a little burger place called Miller's, the kind of place with red booths, neon signs, and milkshakes that looked better than they tasted. I ordered fries with ranch on the side, and Lucas smiled like he'd just learned something important. "Ranch with fries?" he asked. "Don't judge me." I'm not judging, I'm documenting. I laughed. Documenting? He lifted both hands for future reference. At the time, I thought that was adorable. I didn't know how seriously Lucas took future reference. Conversation with him was easy, in a way. Conversation usually wasn't for me. He asked about my classes, my job at the bookstore, the authors I hated shelving because customers always put them back in the wrong place. He told me about doing freelance design work, about how clients always wanted something minimal but exciting, which apparently meant nothing and everything. He made me laugh, not in a loud, wild way, more in a way that surprised me. I'd be halfway through taking a sip of my drink, and he'd say something dry and perfectly timed, and I'd have to cover my mouth so I didn't embarrass myself. After dinner, we saw a movie at the old theater downtown. It wasn't a great movie, but I didn't care. I was too aware of the fact that his arm was resting on the shared armrest, only a few inches from mine. Halfway through, our hands brushed while we both reached for the popcorn. It was stupid. It was electric. I spent the rest of the movie pretending to focus on the screen, while every nerve in my body focused on the back of his hand. When he drove me home, he didn't try to come inside. He didn't pressure me. He didn't make some awkward joke about ending the night. He walked me to the building entrance and waited until I unlocked the door. "I had a really good time," he said. "Me too. Can I see you again?" I tried not to smile too hard. "Yeah, I'd like that." He looked relieved, which made me like him more. Before I went inside, he said, "Text me when you're upstairs, okay?" I paused. I wasn't used to that either. Someone caring whether I made it from the front door to my apartment safely. So I smiled and said, "Okay." When I got inside, I texted him, "Made it upstairs." His reply came almost immediately. "Good. Sleep well, Emily." I stared at that message for a long time. It was nothing. Just 4 words. But I slept better that night than I had in weeks. After that, seeing Lucas became part of my life so quickly, it almost scared me. Almost. We started spending most weekends together. Sometimes it was dinner and a movie. Sometimes it was mini golf, where he was terrible in a way that seemed too charming to be real. Sometimes we went to the park and walked until my coffee went cold in my hands. Sometimes we sat in his car outside my apartment and talked for so long that the windows fogged up. I knew what people called that stage, the honeymoon phase. I knew it wasn't supposed to last forever. I knew people were always their best selves in the beginning. I knew butterflies were not the same thing as love. But I didn't care. For once, I didn't want to be careful. I didn't want to analyze every good thing until I ruined it. I wanted to let myself be happy. Lucas made that easy. He was attentive without seeming clingy. He texted me good morning, but not so much that it felt suffocating. He asked about my day and remembered the answers. If I mentioned a difficult exam on Tuesday, he would text me Tuesday morning to say I'd do great. If I told him an author I liked had a new book coming out, he would send me a screenshot of the release date a few days later. Every little thing he remembered felt like proof that he cared. I didn't realize proof could be collected. The first time he brought me flowers, I almost cried. They weren't roses. I had never liked roses much. They always felt too dramatic, too formal, like something bought in a panic at a grocery store. Lucas brought me tulips, pale pink ones wrapped in brown paper from the flower shop next to Oak and Ember. I stared at them for a second too long. "What?" he asked. "Wrong kind?" "No," I said quickly. "No, they're my favorite." His smile softened. "Good." I frowned a little. "Did I tell you that?" He tilted his head like he was thinking. "Maybe. Or maybe you just seem like a tulip person." I laughed because that sounded like something a sweet guy would say when he got lucky. But I hadn't told him. At least, I didn't think I had. That happened a lot with Lucas. He knew things that made me feel special before they made me feel uneasy. He knew I liked sitting on the aisle seat at the movies because being trapped in the middle made me anxious. He knew I hated horror movies with cheap jump scares, but didn't mind slow, creepy ones. He knew I liked vanilla lattes more than caramel macchiatos, even though I had only ordered caramel once when Oak and Ember ran out of vanilla syrup. He knew I didn't like walking alone after 9. He knew I always checked behind me when I went up the stairs to my apartment. He knew I hated when people stood too close behind me in line. The first few times, I thought it was romantic. The next few times, I thought maybe I was just easier to read than I realized. Once, while we were waiting in line for coffee, Lucas ordered before I could. "Iced vanilla latte for Emily," he said, then looked at me. "Right?" I smiled. "Right." The barista wrote my name on the cup, and Lucas watched her do it. "You know," I said, "you remember a weird amount of things." He grinned. "Is that bad?" "No, it's just unusual." "I pay attention." I smiled when he said it. It sounded romantic at the time. It would take me 6 months to understand how much attention he had really been paying. The more time I spent with him, the more my life started to rearrange itself around him. Not because he asked me to. That's what made it so hard to notice. Lucas never said, "Don't hang out with Maya." He just happened to be free on nights Maya wanted to get dinner. He never said, "Don't go to Oak and Ember without me." He just started showing up there more often, sliding into the chair across from me like it was the most natural thing in the world. He never told me what to wear, but he complimented certain sweaters so specifically that I found myself reaching for them more often. He never demanded my time. He made me want to give it to him. That felt like love to me. Maya noticed before I did. One night, after I canceled plans with her for the second time in a month, because Lucas had surprised me with tickets to a comedy show, she texted me, "Girl, you're disappearing on me." I stared at the message and felt a pinch of guilt. "Sorry," I replied. "I know. Things have just been kind of crazy." She sent back, "Lucas crazy?" I rolled my eyes, but I was smiling. "Maybe." A few seconds later, she replied, "Just don't forget your friends exist, okay?" I promised I wouldn't. And I meant it. But when you're falling in love for the first time, everything outside that feeling starts to seem a little less urgent. Classes, work, friendships, sleep. They all become background noise. The person who makes you feel wanted becomes the main event. And Lucas made me feel wanted all the time. One Friday, he picked me up after my shift at the bookstore with hot chocolate waiting in the cup holder. I hadn't asked for it. I hadn't even told him I was cold. But it had been raining all afternoon, and my jacket was too thin. And when I got into his car, the first thing he did was hand me the cup. "You looked freezing," he said. "When?" He blinked. For a second, it was so quick I almost missed it. Then he smiled. "When you walked out just now." Oh, that made sense. Of course it made sense. He had been parked outside waiting for me. That was normal. Boyfriends did that. Still, something about the way he answered felt a little too fast, like he had stepped around a crack in the floor he already knew was there. I ignored it. I was good at ignoring small things when the big picture looked beautiful. A week later, we went to a used bookstore across town. The place was narrow and dusty, with crooked shelves and handwritten signs taped to the walls. I loved it immediately. While Lucas wandered toward the art section, I found a small display of bookmarks near the register. One of them had a black cat sitting on a crescent moon. It was handmade, laminated, and overpriced for what it was. I picked it up, smiled, then put it back because I couldn't justify spending $12 on a bookmark. I didn't mention it to Lucas. I didn't even think he saw me holding it. 3 days later, he gave it to me outside Oak and Ember. It was tucked inside a book he said he thought I might like. I pulled the bookmark out and stared at it. "Oh my God," I said. "I almost bought this." Lucas smiled. "Really?" "Yeah, at that bookstore." "Huh," he said. "Lucky guess." I looked up at him. "That's a very specific lucky guess. You seem like the kind of person who'd like it." There it was again. That feeling of being known, that warm, dangerous feeling. I kissed him for the first time that night. It happened outside my apartment building under the weak yellow light by the front door. He had walked me home like he always did, hands in his pockets, waiting until I had my keys out. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe the flowers, maybe the bookmark, maybe the way he looked at me like I was something rare instead of something ordinary. I leaned in and he met me halfway. The kiss was soft, careful, almost reverent. When I pulled back, Lucas looked at me like he had been waiting much longer than a few weeks for that moment. "Was that okay?" I asked, suddenly embarrassed. He laughed quietly. "Emily, that was more than okay." I went upstairs dizzy with happiness. That night, I wrote in my journal, for the first time in months. I wrote that I thought I was falling in love. I wrote that Lucas made me feel safe. I wrote that maybe some people really did come into your life for a reason. Sometimes the things that feel like fate are just someone else's plan working perfectly. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that Lucas remembered my coffee order. Lucas brought me tulips. Lucas walked me home. Lucas looked at me like he had found exactly what he had been searching for. And I was too flattered to wonder how long he had been searching. By the time Lucas and I had been dating for a little over 2 months, my life had started to feel unfamiliar in the best possible way. I woke up to good morning texts. I had someone to call after a bad shift at the bookstore. I had someone who wanted to know whether I made it home safely, whether I ate dinner, whether I was sleeping enough. For most people, maybe that wouldn't have been a big deal. For me, it was everything. I didn't realize how quickly I was becoming dependent on it. On him, on the feeling of being checked on, remembered, wanted. Lucas became the first person I wanted to tell things to, even small things that didn't matter. A rude customer came into the bookstore. I texted Lucas. My professor moved an exam. I texted Lucas. The vending machine gave me 2 bags of pretzels instead of 1. I texted Lucas. He always replied. Not always immediately, but close enough that I never felt ignored. He had a way of making even the most boring details of my day seem worth hearing. Maya noticed the change more than anyone. One afternoon after class, she dropped into the chair across from me in the campus library and stared at me until I looked up from my laptop. "What?" I asked. "You tell me." "I'm studying." "No, you're smiling at your phone like it just proposed to you." I locked the screen too quickly. "I'm not." "You are." I rolled my eyes, but I could feel my face worming. Maya leaned back in her chair. "Lucas?" "Maybe." "You've been saying maybe a lot lately." I tried to act annoyed, but I wasn't. Part of me liked that someone had noticed. For once, I had something to blush about. For once, I was the girl with stories about a guy who brought her flowers and remembered her favorite coffee order. For once, I wasn't the person listening to everyone else talk about being loved. "He's just nice," I said. Maya narrowed her eyes. Nice is good. Obsessed is different. I laughed because it sounded dramatic. "He's not obsessed." "I didn't say he was," she said. "I said it's different." At the time, I thought Maya was being protective in the annoying way friends sometimes are, when your happiness starts taking you away from them. I thought she missed me. I thought she didn't understand that Lucas wasn't taking me away from anything. He was giving me something I had never really had before. Looking back, Maya was the first person to say out loud what I was trying not to think. The first strange thing happened on a Wednesday night. I had been studying for a statistics quiz until my brain felt like it was melting. Around midnight, I gave up, changed into an old t-shirt, brushed my teeth, and turned off my bedroom light. My phone buzzed before my head even hit the pillow. "Lucas, sleep well. You've had a long day." I smiled at first. It was sweet. It was exactly the kind of message I had started to expect from him. Then I paused. I hadn't told him I was going to bed. I hadn't even texted him for almost 2 hours. For a few seconds, I stared at the message in the dark, the blue light of the screen making my room feel colder than it was. Then I told myself I was being ridiculous. He knew I had a quiz. He knew I studied late when I was stressed. Maybe he had guessed. Maybe couples just started sensing each other's routines after a while. Maybe this was what it felt like when someone really knew you. So I replied, "You too." and I went to sleep. A few days later, something similar happened. I stopped by the grocery store after work because I was out of cereal, coffee creamer, and the cheap frozen pasta I practically lived on. It was raining and the store was crowded, and by the time I got back to my apartment, I was irritated for no real reason. I had barely put the bags on the kitchen counter when Lucas texted. How was the grocery store? I froze with a carton of oat milk in my hand. This time, there was no easy explanation waiting in my head. I scrolled back through our messages. I hadn't told him I was going. I hadn't mentioned needing groceries. I hadn't posted anything anywhere. I barely use social media, and when I did, it was mostly pictures of books and coffee. I typed, "How did you know I was at the grocery store?" The three dots appeared almost immediately. You said last week you usually go on Thursdays after work, remember? I stared at the message. Had I said that? Maybe. It sounded like something I might have said without thinking. A throwaway detail during one of our long conversations. Lucas remembered throwaway details. That was one of the things I liked about him. Still, my stomach tightened in a way I didn't like. When I didn't answer right away, he sent another message. Sorry, that sounded weird. I just remember random things about you. Then, occupational hazard of being crazy about you. The tension in my chest loosened. I smiled despite myself. He had a gift for that. For finding the exact sentence that made me feel silly for worrying. The third time was harder to ignore. It was a Sunday evening, and I had gone for a walk around my neighborhood just to clear my head. My apartment complex sat on the edge of a quiet residential area, close enough to campus to be convenient, but far enough that the sidewalks emptied early. I liked walking there before dark. It made me feel like I had some control over my own thoughts. I was heading back when I saw Lucas across the street. He was standing near a row of parked cars, wearing a dark hoodie, his hands in his pockets. For 1 second, my brain didn't understand what I was seeing. He looked out of place there, like a character who had wandered into the wrong scene. Then he smiled and lifted a hand. Emily? I crossed the street slowly. What are you doing here? The question came out sharper than I meant it to. Lucas blinked, then gave a small laugh. Wow, good to see you too. No, I just mean, this is my neighborhood. I know. He pointed vaguely behind him. I was grabbing coffee with a friend nearby. I thought I'd walk around a little before heading home. There were no coffee shops on that street, at least none I knew of. But there was a small cafe about 10 minutes away if you cut through the next block. Maybe that was what he meant. Right, I said. Sorry, you just surprised me. His expression softened instantly. I didn't mean to scare you. You didn't. That was a lie. He reached for my hand, and after a moment, I let him take it. I was actually going to text you, he said. Want me to walk you back? I should have said no. Not because anything had happened yet. Not because he had done anything obviously wrong, but because some part of me had gone quiet the second I saw him standing there, like my body understood something my mind wasn't ready to admit. Instead, I said, sure. And when he walked me back to my building, I told myself the uneasy feeling in my stomach was just guilt. Lucas was my boyfriend. He was allowed to be near my neighborhood. He was allowed to care about me. There is something addictive about being studied when you have spent your whole life feeling ignored. I mistook familiarity for intimacy. A few nights later, I finally told Maya. We were sitting in her car outside a taco place near campus, eating chips from a paper bag because neither of us wanted to go home yet. I told her about the sleep text, the grocery store text, Lucas showing up near my apartment. I expected her to tease me, or tell me I was overthinking, or make some joke about how I had attracted a golden retriever boyfriend. She didn't. Maya set her food down and looked at me. Emily, what? That's weird. I felt myself get defensive immediately. It's not that weird. Yes, it is. He remembers things. Remembering your coffee order is one thing, she said. Knowing when you're asleep and where you are is another. He didn't know where I was. He texted you about the grocery store before you told him. I probably mentioned it. Probably. I looked away. Maya sighed, softer this time. I'm not saying he's a serial killer. That's comforting. I'm serious. She turned in her seat to face me fully. There's sweet, and then there's too sweet. I hated that the sentence landed somewhere deep in my chest. He's not like that, I said. Like what? I don't know. Creepy, controlling, whatever you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you to keep your eyes open. I picked at the corner of the paper bag. Maya continued, Don't give him your key. Don't tell him every part of your schedule. Don't share your passwords. And if something feels off, don't talk yourself out of it just because you like him. That last part stung, because I had been doing exactly that. I'm happy, I said quietly. Maya's face softened. I know. And I want you to be happy. I just don't want you to confuse being watched with being loved. I looked at her then. The words felt too close to something I didn't want named. So I laughed too lightly and said, You've been listening to too many true crime podcasts. Maya didn't laugh back. 2 weeks passed after that, and nothing strange happened. That was the part that made it easy to forget. Lucas didn't show up unexpectedly. He didn't say anything odd. He didn't push for more information than I gave him. He was just Lucas again. Sweet, funny, patient Lucas. The Lucas who brought me soup when I had a cold. The Lucas who rubbed circles into my palm when I got anxious in crowded places. The Lucas who kissed my forehead like I was something fragile. I started to feel ashamed of myself for doubting him. I told myself Maya had planted ideas in my head. I told myself I was inexperienced. I told myself maybe healthy relationships just felt intense when you weren't used to them. So, when Lucas invited me to spend the night at his place for the first time, I said yes. His apartment was on the second floor of an old duplex, about 10 minutes from campus. The outside looked ordinary, pale siding, 2 mailboxes, a porch light with dead bugs trapped inside it. Inside, it was cleaner than I expected. Almost too clean. Not in a creepy way, just in the way some people keep their homes when they don't own much. The living room had a gray couch, a coffee table, and framed prints on the wall. His bedroom was simple: bed, dresser, desk, closet, a few cardboard boxes stacked neatly in the corner. It smelled like laundry detergent and the same cedar soap scent I recognized from his jacket. Sorry, it's boring, he said, watching me look around. It's not boring. It is, but I'm working on becoming more interesting. I smiled. Good luck. We ordered pizza and watched a movie on his couch. One of those slow thrillers he liked, and I pretended to understand. Halfway through, I fell asleep with my head on his shoulder. When I woke up, the credits were rolling, and Lucas was looking down at me with an expression so tender it made my throat tighten. What? I whispered. Nothing, he said. You just look peaceful. I should have found that sweet. I did find it sweet. That was the problem. Later, in his bedroom, I lay awake longer than he did. I was nervous, not because Lucas had done anything wrong, but because it was my first time spending the night with someone I was dating. Every sound in the room felt louder than it should have. His breathing, the heater clicking, a car passing outside. Eventually, I fell asleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up needing to pee. The room was dark except for a thin line of streetlight coming through the blinds. Lucas was asleep beside me, one arm bent under his pillow. His phone was on the nightstand, screen down, charging. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could and padded toward the bathroom. That was when I heard it. A soft vibration. Bzzzt. I stopped. At first, I thought it was Lucas's phone. But when I look back, his phone was still on the nightstand, dark and still. Bzzzt. The sound came again. Not from the nightstand, from the dresser, or maybe the closet. I stood there in the dark, half asleep, heart beating a little faster than it needed to. The sound was so faint that I wondered if I had imagined it. Maybe it was pipes. Maybe it was the heater. Maybe it was some old alarm or electronic thing buried in one of his boxes. I was tired. Too tired to investigate. So I went to the bathroom, came back, and crawled into bed. But in the morning, I remembered. Lucas was making coffee in the kitchen when I walked out wearing one of his t-shirts. Sunlight came through the blinds, striping the floor. Everything looked normal again. Safe again. Still, I asked, "Hey, this is probably weird, but do you have another phone?" Lucas turned around. For 1 second, his face changed. It was fast. So fast that if I hadn't been looking directly at him, I would have missed it. His eyes sharpened. His mouth went still. Then he laughed. "What?" "I thought I heard a phone vibrating last night," I said. "But yours was on the nightstand." He set his mug down slowly. "Another phone?" His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. I shrugged, suddenly embarrassed. "I don't know. I was half asleep." He stared at me a moment too long. Then his smile came back. "Babe, I think you dreamed it." "Maybe. I mean, you can check if you want." I blinked. "What?" He walked into the bedroom and started opening drawers. Socks, t-shirts, workout clothes, nothing unusual. He opened the closet too, pushing aside jackets and a laundry basket. "See?" he said lightly. "No secret burner phone." Very disappointing, honestly. Would have made me seem mysterious. I laughed because he wanted me to laugh, and because I wanted to feel stupid more than I wanted to feel scared. "Sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to accuse you." He stepped closer and kissed my forehead. "You didn't?" But his arms around me felt tighter than usual. For the rest of the morning, he was perfect. He made me pancakes. He played music while cleaning the kitchen. He kissed me goodbye at my car and told me to text him when I got home. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, I had almost convinced myself the whole thing was nothing. Almost. The first red flags didn't look red. They looked like flowers, good morning texts, and someone remembering my coffee order. So I ignored them. For the next few days, I kept waiting for the strange feeling to leave. It didn't. It followed me home from class. It sat with me during my shifts at the bookstore. It slipped into the quiet moments between text messages from Lucas, even when those messages were perfectly normal. Especially when they were perfectly normal. "Good morning, beautiful. Hope work isn't too crazy today. Don't forget to eat something real. Text me when you're home." The same messages that used to make me feel warm now made something tighten in my stomach. I hated that. I hated that one half-asleep moment in his apartment had managed to stain everything good between us. So, I did what I had been doing from the beginning. I explained it away. Maybe I had dreamed the sound. Maybe some old electronic thing had buzzed in one of his drawers. Maybe the heater in his apartment made noises. Maybe my brain had taken Maya's warning and started building monsters out of nothing. Lucas had opened his drawers. He had opened his closet. He had laughed it off. A guilty person wouldn't do that, I told myself. A guilty person would hide. That thought comforted me for about 3 days. Then things started happening in my apartment. Small things. So small that saying them out loud made me feel ridiculous. One night, I came home from work and found my closet door slightly open. Not wide open, just cracked, maybe 2 or 3 inches. I stood in the bedroom doorway with my backpack still on my shoulder, staring at the dark line between the door and the frame. I always closed my closet. Always. My apartment was tiny, and if the closet door was open, it blocked part of the walkway between my bed and dresser. I hated bumping into it in the middle of the night, so closing it had become automatic. Still, I told myself I must have forgotten. The next morning, I noticed one of my books was out of place on the shelf by my bed. It was tilted forward, like someone had pulled it out and pushed it back too quickly. I fixed it without thinking, then froze with my hand still on the spine. Had I done that? Maybe. Probably. A few days later, I came home and found the curtains in my bedroom pulled slightly apart. That bothered me more than the closet. I was careful with my curtains. My apartment was on the second floor. And even though I knew no one could easily see in, I didn't like the idea of my window being exposed after dark. Every evening, before turning on my lamp, I pulled the curtains all the way closed. But that night, there was a gap in the middle, just wide enough to look through. I stood there for a long time, looking at the black glass of the window. My reflection stared back at me, pale and still. Behind my own reflection, I saw nothing. No face, no movement, no shadow. But I felt watched anyway. I checked the lock on my front door, then the window, then the chain lock, then the front door again. Everything was locked. Nothing was missing. No one had been there. That was what I told myself. Then I checked the spare key under the small ceramic planter outside my door. It was still there, but it wasn't where I had left it. Usually, I tucked it under the left edge of the planter, flat against the concrete. That night, it was angled slightly outward, like someone had slid it back in a hurry. My mouth went dry. For a moment, I thought about calling Maya. I even opened our messages. Then I imagined trying to explain it. My closet was open. My book was crooked. My curtains moved. My spare key looked weird. I could already hear how paranoid I sounded. So I put the key back under the planter, exactly where I always kept it. That was another mistake. I didn't know it then, but sometimes fear gives you the answer before proof does. And I ignored it because proof felt easier to trust. A week later, Lucas invited me over again. I almost said no, not because I had decided anything, not because I was ready to confront him. I just felt tired, drained, like my nerves had been pulled tight for too long. But Lucas sounded so happy on the phone. "I'll cook," he said. "Actual food, not pizza." "You cook now?" I contain multitudes. "That's what people say when they're about to poison someone." He laughed. "Come on, give me some credit. I'd at least make the poison taste good." It was such a normal joke, such a Lucas joke. Dry, silly, perfectly timed. And just like that, I felt myself soften. Maybe Maya had made me paranoid. Maybe my apartment was old. Maybe I was stressed. Maybe love was supposed to feel overwhelming at first. So I went. Lucas made pasta with garlic bread and a salad he clearly didn't care about. There were candles on the kitchen table, but not too many. Music played from a small speaker on the counter. He had bought the white wine I liked, the one I had only mentioned once after a bad day at work. Of course he remembered. Lucas always remembered. "You're quiet tonight," he said as he poured my glass. "Am I?" "A little. Just tired." He watched me across the table. "School?" "School, work, life." "Me?" I looked up. His tone was light, but his eyes were not. "What? Am I part of what's stressing you out?" For a second, I considered telling the truth. Not all of it, just enough. I could have said, "Sometimes you know things I don't remember telling you." I could have said, "I keep feeling like someone has been in my apartment." I could have said, "I heard something in your room that night, and I don't think I dreamed it." Instead, I smiled. "No," I said, "you're the good part." His expression relaxed. "Good," he said softly. "I want to be." The way he said it made me feel guilty for ever doubting him. After dinner, we curled up on his couch and watched another movie. This one was slower than the last. All shadows and long silences. Lucas loved those kinds of films. The ones where nothing obvious happened for an hour, but you still felt like something terrible was moving just outside the frame. About halfway through, he paused the movie and looked at me. "Can you believe it's almost been 6 months?" I smiled. "That sounds crazy." "It feels longer." "Is that a good thing?" He reached for my hand and rubbed his thumb over my knuckles. "The best thing." I looked down, embarrassed by how much I wanted to believe him. Then he said, "Anniversaries are important to me." I laughed a little. 6 months isn't exactly an anniversary. It is if it matters. There was something in his voice I couldn't read. I should have asked what he meant, but he kissed my hand, and the question dissolved before I could form it. Later, in his bedroom, I tried to stay awake. I don't know why. Maybe because some quiet part of me wanted to hear the noise again. Maybe because I needed to prove to myself that I had imagined it the first time. Lucas fell asleep quickly, one arm across his chest, his breathing slow and even. His phone sat on the nightstand where it always did, charging, screen dark. I lay beside him in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The room was too quiet. That was the thing about quiet. Once you started listening to it, every tiny sound became important. The hum of the heater, a car passing outside, the soft creak of the old duplex settling, Lucas breathing. Then, bzzzt, my whole body went cold. I didn't move. For a second, I thought maybe I had imagined it, because I had been waiting for it. Then it came again. Bzzzt. This time there was no confusion. It wasn't Lucas's phone. His phone was still on the nightstand. The sound was coming from the closet. I turned my head slowly. The closet door was closed, but not all the way. A thin black gap ran from top to bottom. I could see the sleeve of a jacket hanging inside. Bzzzt. My heart started pounding so hard I was afraid it would wake him. I sat up carefully, moving inch by inch, watching Lucas the entire time. He didn't stir. His mouth was slightly open. His face looked peaceful. That almost made it worse. I slipped out of bed and placed my bare feet on the floor. The wood was cold. I crossed the room without turning on the light. The only glow came from the street lamp outside, cutting pale stripes through the blinds. I reached the closet and paused with my fingers on the handle. For one strange second, I wanted to go back to bed. I wanted to choose not to know, because not knowing meant I could still pretend. Not knowing meant Lucas could still be Lucas, the sweet boyfriend, the shy guy from the coffee shop, the person who brought me tulips and kissed my forehead and told me I mattered. I opened the closet. At first, I saw only clothes, jackets, hoodies, a couple of button-down shirts, a laundry basket, a stack of folded blankets, 2 cardboard boxes, an old pair of sneakers. I stood there, listening. Bzzz. Lower. The sound came from beneath the blankets. My hands were shaking as I lifted them one by one. Under the blankets was a shoebox pushed into the back corner of the closet, the kind of old box people keep receipts or cords in. I looked back at Lucas. Still asleep? I pulled the shoebox out. The lid was tucked on tight. For a moment, I just held it. Then I opened it. Inside was an old phone. Not cracked, not broken, just older, smaller, with a black case worn smooth around the edges. The screen lit up as another notification came through. Storage almost full. That was what it said. Storage almost full. I stared at the words, not understanding them at first. Then the lock screen shifted slightly as the notification faded, and I saw the wallpaper. It was me. For a few seconds, my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. It was a picture of me asleep. Not a cute picture. Not a picture from a night when I had fallen asleep during a movie and Lucas had taken it because he thought I looked peaceful. This was different. I was lying on my side in bed, hair across my face, one hand tucked under my cheek. The angle was high, looking down at me. And it wasn't Lucas's bed. It was mine. My bedroom. My sheets. My lamp. My wall. A sound came out of me before I could stop it. Not a scream. Something smaller. Broken. I clapped a hand over my mouth and looked back at Lucas. He shifted slightly but didn't wake. My fingers felt numb as I swiped up. The phone didn't have a lock screen password. For some reason, that scared me more. Like he had been so sure no one would ever find it. There were only a few apps on the home screen. Messages, notes, photos, a folder with no name. Nothing else. No social media, no games, no normal signs that this phone belonged to a normal person. I tapped photos. A password screen appeared. 4 digits. I stared at it. My first thought was to put the phone back. Close the box, get dressed, leave, call Maya from the car. But my thumb hovered over the numbers. I needed to know. I tried 0000. Wrong. I tried 1,234. Wrong. I tried Lucas's birthday, but then realized I didn't know it. Not exactly. He had mentioned being a fall baby, but somehow we had never talked about the date. Then I remembered something he had said a few weeks earlier. We had been sitting in Oak and Ember sharing a pastry neither of us had wanted to buy alone when he asked when my birthday was. I told him July 18th. He had smiled in this strange, soft way. My lucky day, he said. I laughed then. Why? Because it's the day the world got you. I had blushed so hard I had to look away. Now, standing barefoot in his bedroom, with his hidden phone in my hand, the memory made my stomach turn. I typed 0718. The Photos app opened. For a second, nothing happened inside me. No scream, no tears, no thoughts. Just the grid of images loading, row after row after row. And every single thumbnail was me. There were hundreds. Number, thousands. I scrolled once, and the screen barely moved. My face, my hair, my apartment, my school, my job, my coffee shop, my life. All of it trapped inside that phone. At first, the pictures were from the past few months, the time when Lucas and I had been dating. Somehow, that made my brain try to bargain. Maybe he was just weird. Maybe he was sentimental in a sick way. Maybe he had taken pictures of me when I wasn't looking because he loved me too much and didn't know boundaries. Even as I thought it, I knew how pathetic it sounded. Still, I clung to it for a few more seconds. I saw myself asleep on his couch, brushing my teeth in his bathroom, standing in his kitchen wearing one of his t-shirts, reading on his bed, laughing at something on TV, crying quietly after a tense phone call with my mom, a moment I had thought was private because Lucas had been in the shower. He hadn't been in the shower, or if he had, the camera hadn't been. My hand shook harder. I kept scrolling. The dates moved backward. 6 months. 7. 8. My breath caught. That wasn't possible. Lucas and I had been together for 6 months. We had known each other for maybe a little longer than that, if you counted the coffee shop glances. There should not have been pictures older than that. But there were. There I was at Oak and Ember, sitting at my table by the window, reading a book with a blue cover. There I was, walking across campus with my backpack slipping off one shoulder. There I was, standing in line at the grocery store, comparing 2 boxes of cereal. There I was, outside my apartment building, digging through my purse for my keys. There I was with Maya in the library. There I was, leaving the bookstore after closing, arms wrapped around myself against the cold. The room seemed to tilt. The first time Lucas spoke to me at Oak and Ember was not the beginning. It was an entrance, a scene he had waited to step into. I scrolled faster. The dates kept going back. A year and a half, almost 2. My skin felt too tight for my body. Then I saw the pictures from my apartment. At first, they were taken from outside. Me at my desk at 2 a.m, laptop open, face lit by the screen. Me sitting on my bed eating cereal straight from the box. Me brushing my hair in front of the mirror. Me sleeping, so many of me sleeping. The angles were wrong. High, distant, slightly distorted through glass. My second-story bedroom window was visible in some reflections. The pictures had been taken from outside, but from a place no one should have been able to stand. The fire escape on the side of the building, the tree near the parking lot, maybe even a ladder. I felt sick. Then the angles changed. I stopped scrolling. One picture showed me sitting at my desk, writing in my journal. But the photo wasn't taken from the window. It came from behind me, from inside the room. Another showed me asleep, taken from the shelf near my closet. Another from the corner near the ceiling. Another from near the smoke detector. I looked up from the phone, suddenly unable to breathe. My apartment, my safe place, my tiny, creaking, imperfect apartment. He had been inside. Maybe once, maybe many times. Maybe when I was gone, maybe when I wasn't. The closet door, the book on the shelf, the curtains, the spare key, the sleep well texts, the grocery store message, the way he always knew when I got home. Every little thing I had explained away came back at once. No longer separate, no longer harmless. A pattern. I kept calling it thoughtful. Later, the police would call it a pattern. My thumb brushed the screen, and one more picture opened. It was me on my 21st birthday, sitting across from Maya at a restaurant, smiling at a slice of cake with one candle stuck in it. I remembered that night. I remembered thinking it had been small but nice. I remembered walking home afterward, feeling a little lonely because everyone had left early. In the photo, I was smiling. But whoever had taken it hadn't been sitting at our table. They had been outside, across the street, shooting through the restaurant window. My birthday. His password. His lucky day. I was still staring at the picture when the bed creaked behind me, my whole body locked. For one desperate second, I hoped Lucas had only shifted in his sleep. Then I heard his voice. Emily? Soft, sleepy, almost normal. I didn't answer. The mattress creaked again. Emily? Closer now. I could hear him sitting up. I stood in front of the open closet with the phone glowing in my hand, unable to move, unable to hide what I had found, unable to make myself turn around. He said my name a third time. This time, he didn't sound sleepy anymore. Emily. The floorboards groaned behind me. One step, then another, then another. His footsteps stopped only a few inches from my back. I waited for him to gasp, to snatch the phone away, to start lying, to say it wasn't what it looked like, to apologize, to panic. He didn't. For a moment, there was only his breathing and mine. Then Lucas started laughing, not loudly at first, just a quiet breath through his nose like he was amused. Then it grew, a low, dry laugh that crawled up the back of my neck and settled there like a cold hand. I stared at the picture on the screen until my vision blurred. Lucas leaned closer. I could feel the warmth of him behind me. And then he whispered, almost tenderly, "Happy anniversary, sweetheart." For a few seconds, I couldn't move. Lucas was standing so close behind me that I could feel his breath near my ear. The hidden phone was still in my hand, the screen still glowing, the picture of my 21st birthday staring back at me like proof from another life. Happy anniversary, sweetheart. The words didn't make sense at first. My mind was too full of images. My bedroom, my window, my coffee shop, my face asleep in places where no one should have been watching me. I forced myself to speak. My voice came out small. Anniversary of what? Lucas didn't answer right away. He reached around me, not to grab the phone, but to touch the edge of the shoebox, almost gently, like I had opened something precious instead of something horrifying. Then he said, "The day I found you." I turned around slowly. He was smiling. Not the nervous smile from the coffee shop. Not the soft smile he gave me when he brought me tulips. This was different, calm, proud, like he had been waiting a long time for me to understand something beautiful. My stomach twisted. "The day you found me?" I whispered. "At Oak and Ember," he said. "You were sitting by the window. You had that green sweater on, the one with the little hole in the sleeve." I remembered that sweater. I hated that I remembered that sweater. Lucas's eyes softened. "You looked so sad that day." My grip tightened around the phone. "That was 2 years ago." "I know." He said it like it was romantic. Like time made it sweeter. Like stalking me for 2 years was proof of commitment. "I didn't even know you," I said. "But I knew you." "No, you didn't." His smile faded a little. "Yes, I did, Emily." The way he said my name made my skin crawl. "I knew you hated sitting with your back to the door. I knew you ordered vanilla lattes when you were stressed and tea when you were trying to feel healthier. I knew you smiled at dogs on the street but never asked to pet them. I knew you called your mom every Sunday, even when the calls made you cry." I stepped backward, but my shoulder hit the closet door. Lucas moved closer. "I knew you better than anyone." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You watched me." "I protected you. You broke into my apartment." His expression changed then. Not guilt, not shame, irritation. "You always left that spare key under the planter," he said. "That wasn't safe." A sound came out of me, half laugh, half sob. "So you used it?" "I made sure you were okay. You put cameras in my room." "I needed to know you were safe." "Safe from who?" He stared at me. For the first time, he looked genuinely confused. From everyone else. That was when I understood the worst part. Lucas didn't think he was lying. He didn't think he was evil. In his mind, every picture, every message, every time he had followed me home, every time he had stood outside my window or entered my apartment, it had all been love. Not the kind of love that holds your hand. The kind that closes around your throat and calls it protection. I looked past him toward the bedroom door. He noticed. His face softened again, too quickly. "Emily," he said, "don't do that." "Do what?" "Look at me like I'm some kind of monster." My pulse pounded in my ears. I knew I couldn't scream. I knew I couldn't run. Not yet. He was between me and the door. He was taller than me, stronger than me, and now that I knew what he had done, I didn't know what else he was capable of. So I did the only thing I could think of. I made myself cry harder. Not because the tears were fake. They weren't. But I used them. "I'm scared," I whispered. His expression shifted immediately. "I know," he said, stepping closer. "I know, this is a lot." A lot. That was what he called it. Not a crime. Not a violation. Not 2 years of stealing pieces of my life. A lot. "I need water," I said. "I feel like I'm going to throw up." Lucas studied my face. For one horrible second, I thought he wouldn't let me move. Then he reached out and brushed a strand of hair away from my cheek. I didn't flinch. I wanted to. Every part of me wanted to, but I didn't. "Okay," he said softly. "We'll talk in the kitchen." Like we were still a couple having a misunderstanding. Like I hadn't just found a second life of myself hidden inside his closet. He stepped back just enough for me to move. I kept the phone in my hand. His eyes flicked down to it. "You don't need that," he said. "I know," I whispered, but I didn't put it down. I walked slowly toward the bedroom door. Lucas followed so close behind me that I could feel him there without looking. My legs felt weak, but I forced them to keep moving. One step, then another, then another. The hallway outside his bedroom was narrow. On one side was a small bookshelf stacked with old design magazines and loose papers. On the other was the bathroom door. The front door was maybe 15 feet away. 15 feet had never looked so far. "Emily," Lucas said behind me. I stopped. His voice was lower now. "Give me the phone." My fingers tightened around it. "I just want water." "Give me the phone first." I turned just enough to see him. His face was no longer soft. That was when I knew the performance was over. I threw the phone at him as hard as I could. It hit him near the cheekbone. He cursed and stumbled back, one hand flying to his face. At the same time, I shoved the bookshelf with both hands. It toppled sideways. Magazines, books, and a ceramic mug crashed across the hallway floor. Lucas lunged for me, but his foot caught on the mess. He slammed into the wall and I ran. I didn't grab my shoes. I didn't grab my purse. I barely grabbed the door handle before he shouted my name. Not sweetly this time. Not lovingly. Like a command. "Emily?" I yanked the front door open and ran into the cold night barefoot. The porch light flickered above me. The wooden stairs bit into the soles of my feet as I flew down them. Behind me, I heard Lucas hit the doorway. "Emily, stop!" I didn't. I ran across the small front yard, over wet grass and gravel, toward the house next door. I could feel tiny stones cutting my feet, but the pain barely registered. I reached the neighbor's porch and pounded on the door with both fists. "Please," I screamed, "please open the door." For one endless second, nothing happened. Then the porch light came on. The door opened a crack, chain still latched. An older woman peered out, gray hair pulled back, robe wrapped tightly around her. "Help me," I sobbed. "Please, he's going to hurt me." Her eyes moved past me. Lucas was standing on the sidewalk, breathing hard, one hand pressed to his face. For 1 second, his expression was pure rage. Then he saw the woman, and just like that, he changed. His shoulders dropped. His face softened. His voice turned gentle. "Emily," he called. "Come on, you're scaring people." The woman looked at him, then back at me. I don't know what she saw on my face, but whatever it was, she unlatched the chain immediately and pulled me inside. I collapsed into her entryway. She shut the door and locked it. Lucas knocked a moment later. Not pounded, knocked. Calm, polite. "Ma'am," he said through the door. "I'm sorry. My girlfriend is having a panic attack. If you could just let me talk to her." "She asked for help," the woman snapped. "Step away from my door." Then she picked up the phone and called 911. Her name was Mrs. Donnelly. I don't remember everything I told the dispatcher. I remember saying hidden phone, pictures, cameras, my apartment. I remember Mrs. Donnelly wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. I remember staring at my dirty, bleeding feet and thinking they didn't look like mine. By the time the police arrived, Lucas was still outside. He tried to explain. Of course he did. He told them I had misunderstood. He told them I was emotional. He told them we had an argument. He said the phone was old. He said the pictures were private. He said couples took pictures of each other all the time. Then one officer asked why there were pictures of me from 2 years before we started dating. Lucas stopped talking. They found the phone in the hallway of his apartment, cracked but still working. They found the shoebox. They found printed photos in another box under his bed. They found a notebook with my class schedule, work schedule, and the days I usually went grocery shopping. At my apartment, they found a camera inside the smoke detector, another hidden in a fake outlet near my desk, another facing my bed from the shelf by the closet. They found a copy of my key in Lucas's kitchen drawer. The spare key under my planter was gone. I moved out 2 days later. Maya helped me pack because I couldn't be alone in that apartment anymore. I remember standing in the middle of my bedroom, looking at the smoke detector above me, and realizing I had spent months changing clothes, sleeping, crying, laughing, and living under his eyes. My home had not been mine. Not really. Lucas was arrested. There were charges, hearings, statements, words like stalking, unlawful surveillance, breaking and entering. Words that sounded official and cold, too small for what it felt like to have your life stolen quietly, while you were busy mistaking it for love. People always ask if I'm okay now. I never know how to answer that. I have a new apartment, no spare key outside, extra locks on the door, curtains that stay closed before sunset. I check smoke detectors, outlets, vents, shelves, everything. I don't sit with my back to the door anymore. I don't let men walk me home after one date. I don't think surprise gifts are automatically romantic. And I don't go to Oak and Ember coffee. Not anymore. For 6 months, I thought I was living a love story. But Lucas had been living it for 2 years before I even knew his name. My biggest regret wasn't falling in love with him. It was ignoring the part of me that knew something was wrong just because I wanted so badly to be loved.